the allegories of his prophetic writings. But if you, I tried to do that in this short book, if you understand some of the key figures, it then becomes quite clear. So there's a sort of sunlight beyond what appears to be a rather misty mountain or mountain range of obscurity. But there is definitely shining light, and it's well worth the effort. For instance, he does talk about figures like Los and Urizen. Urizen is, for him, the evil force, the negative force of reason. And Urizen is rather like the horizon. It's something very constraining, restricting. An example of this mechanical reason, which is in his figure, was Newton. He particularly laid into Newton and Locke. It's ironic, although I don't know if any of you go to the British Museum, but as you enter... Library, sorry. Yeah, library. As you enter the courtyard, on your left, there's this statue by Edoardo Palazzi of Newton. And it said on a little plaque, I read it this evening, it says, after William Blake, and funded by the football pools. And the irony is that people see this as a great figure of exploring nature, but for Blake it was a totally negative image, because it's a man who's leaning down with protractors, measuring the ratio. He says Newton measuring the ratio, and the ratio is something Blake said, he who sees the ratio only sees himself. He doesn't see anything else. And Newton, he said, God save me from Newton's single vision and the sleep of Newton. He didn't actually realize that Newton, in fact, had a whole vision inside him as well, and spent a lot of his life in alchemy. But that this idea of the constrained figure, crabbed and measuring and weighing, was anathema to him. And that's why you see the contrast with this figure on the front of the book, open, and this is a rising dawn. This is Albion rising from his chains, and also what the Victorians call glad day. But the physical nature of the images expresses his beliefs. Part of this dialectical way of looking at the world is that we have, as I say, Euros on the one hand, and Los is another character who for him symbolizes forgiveness, imagination, generosity, as opposed to this mechanical reason, selfishness, and a narrow view of the world. But many of you may be familiar with his Songs of Innocence and Experience. But in the Songs of Innocence, he does portray a world of infant joy, where you see wise guardians looking at children playing on the echoing green, and there's white and black boys playing together, and it's a very secure and peaceful vision of the world. But this swings over into the age of experience. And Blake suggesting we all, like Rousseau, he all believed that we were all born naturally good, and then depraved by the institutions and by what he called the mind-forged manacles, the negative way of seeing the world, the chains of illusion. So in the Songs of Experience, we see that there's aged ignorance clipping the wings of youth. There's also the school has become a prison, and that the garden of love, which I'll read, this is really about how also repressive morality of the church imposes itself on the imagination and the the natural spontaneity of our desires. He said, I went to the garden of love, and saw what I'd never seen before. A chapel was built in the mist, where I used to play on the green. And the gates of this chapel were shut, and thou shalt not writ over the door. So I turned to the garden of love, that so many sweet flowers bore. And I saw it was filled with graves, and tombstones where flowers should be. And priests in black gowns were walking their rounds, and binding with briars my joys and desires. And he goes on to say how in this world of experience, the chimney sweep is forced to praise God and the King, who make up a heaven of our misery. He also in this collection of the Songs of Experience comes perhaps his most relevant poem here tonight, which is about London, which really showed the first-hand effects of the struggle between the rich and the poor. And London is probably one of his most, I think, moving short poems, and in it the metropolis appears as a city of lost innocence. He uses the word chartered twice, which I think is associated with a city, what we now call capitalism, with cheating and deceit, which we're all very familiar of, particularly in recent times. But he says that I wandered through each chartered street, near where the chartered Thames does flow, and mark in every face I meet marks of weakness, marks of woe. In every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, in every voice, in every ban, the mind-forged manacles I hear. How the chimney sweepers cry, every blackening church appalls, and the hapless soldier's sigh runs in blood down palace walls. But most through midnight street I hear how the youthful harlot's curse blasts the newborn infant's tear, and blights with plagues the marriage hearse. So I think in this vision of London, he sees people controlled by the mind-forged manacles of self-interest and hypocrisy. The church is indifferent to the suffering of the workers, and the monarchy is a direct relationship between the monarchy and war, particularly where he talks about the hapless soldier's sigh runs in blood down palace walls. And so the whole poem really, I think, is about the state institutions' repression and this sort of heartless and acquisitive morality which came to prevail in his own day.